The gunshot didn't echo twice. Li Zhuwan staggered once, then slid down the side of his black Mercedes, blood soaking through his white shirt. The underground garage fell silent. Too silent. Lakeisha Bell froze behind a concrete pillar, her chest tight, her hands shaking. 20 feet away, the most feared Korean Mafia boss in the city was bleeding out. Near the stairwell, his partner Hana stared at him and did nothing. "I can't," Hana whispered into the dark. "If I call anyone outside our circle, we're dead." Another car engine revved somewhere above them. Zhu Wan lifted his head just enough to see Lakeisha. His eyes met hers, not commanding, not cold. "Go." Lakeisha took one step back, then she stopped, because she understood something Hana didn't. Sometimes the most dangerous choice isn't breaking the rules, it's obeying them. And in the next few minutes, Lakeisha Bell was about to do the one thing his own people refused, a decision that would save his life and make sure she could never stay in it. If this story of impossible choices and dangerous loyalty grabbed you, make sure to hit that subscribe button for love and tension. What you're about to witness is a woman who learned that sometimes saving someone means breaking every rule they live by. Jump into the comments. I need to know, would you risk everything for someone who avenged your past? Now, let me take you back to where this all began. The soul rain fell like broken promises, drumming against the cracked window of Lakeisha Bill's tiny apartment above the African grocery store in Itaewon. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at her phone screen, reading the same message for the 100th time. Your father's debt, 500 million won, payment due in 72 hours. Consequences will be severe. At 28, Lakeisha had built a life on careful distance. Her curves drew attention she never wanted. Her dark skin made her stand out in a city that hadn't always been kind. And her past, well, that was a graveyard she'd buried deep. She worked 3 jobs, translating Korean documents for African businesses, styling hair in a small salon, and teaching English to elementary students who loved her accent. She sent money home to Ghana every month, money her father apparently gambled away to loan sharks. She hadn't spoken to him in 5 years, not since he'd sold her childhood home to pay gambling debts the first time, not since she'd fled to South Korea with nothing but a student visa and survival instincts sharp as broken glass. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Miss Bell. The voice was smooth, accented Korean spoken with precision. "My name is Yoon Tae-sung. I represent certain financial interests your father engaged with. We should meet." "I don't have anything to do with my father's choices," Lakeisha said, keeping her voice steady even as her hands trembled. She'd learned long ago that showing fear was blood in the water. "Your father listed you as collateral. A traditional approach perhaps, but binding nonetheless. Tomorrow, 8 p.m., Songdo Club in Gangnam. Come alone or we visit your salon, your students, your roommate." The line went dead. Lakeisha sat in the darkness, rain painting shadows across her brown skin. She'd escaped abusers before, men who'd seen her body as commodity, who'd hurt her in ways that still woke her screaming. She'd clawed her way to something resembling peace, and now her father's weakness was dragging her back to hell. But she wasn't the same broken girl anymore. The Songdo Club pulsed with bass-heavy K-hip-hop, its interior bathed in crimson light that made everything look like it was bleeding. Lakeisha wore a simple black dress that hugged her full hips and emphasized her small waist, her natural hair pulled back in a sleek bun. She'd learned to armor herself in confidence, even when terror gnawed her insides. Yoon Tae-sung waited in a private booth on the 2nd level, his suit expensive enough to feed a family for months. 2 men flanked him, stone-faced and bulging with concealed weapons. But it was the man sitting beside Yoon that froze Lakeisha's breath. Li Mun looked like violence wrapped in silk, sharp cheekbones, eyes dark as midnight water, black hair styled back to reveal a face that could have sold cologne or ordered executions with equal ease. His tattoos crept up his neck, traditional Korean dragons intertwined with chrysanthemums. His suit was charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, and when his gaze locked onto Lakeisha, she felt X-rayed down to her bones. "Miss Bell," Yoon gestured to the seat across from them. "Please." Lakeisha sat, spine straight, meeting Ju-won's stare without flinching. She'd been objectified by predators enough to recognize another one, but something in his expression wasn't quite hunger, it was assessment, cold and clinical. "Your father owes us 500 million won," Yoon continued, sliding a folder across the table. "Plus interest, the total reaches 650 million. He's fled Korea, which makes you responsible." "I'm not responsible for his debts," Lakeisha said, her voice firm despite the fear coiling in her stomach. "That's not legal." Yoon smiled without warmth. "Legality is flexible in our world, Miss Bell. You have 3 options. Pay in full by Friday, work for us until the debt is cleared. We have establishments where your attributes would be profitable." Lakeisha's jaw clenched. "Not again. Never again." "Or," she forced out. Lee Ju-won spoke for the first time, his voice quiet and razor-sharp. "Or you marry me." The club's music seemed to fade into white noise. Lakeisha blinked, certain she'd misheard. "Excuse me?" "It's a business arrangement," Ju-won continued, his eyes never leaving hers. "I need a wife to satisfy certain traditional expectations within my organization. You need your father's debt erased and protection from collection. 6 months. You play the role, follow instructions, and when it's done, you walk away free. Your father's debt forgiven, and you receive 200 million won for your trouble." "This is insane," Lakeisha whispered, her mind racing. "You don't even know me. I know you work 3 jobs, send money home despite your father's betrayals, and you have a student visa expiring in 4 months with no sponsor," Ju-won said flatly, reciting her life like reading a grocery list. "I know you were assaulted by 3 men in Lagos when you were 19, that you testified against them, and they received minimal sentences. I know you came here to disappear. I'm offering you a different kind of disappearance." Lakeisha's blood turned to ice. The Lagos incident, she'd never spoken about it in Korea, never written it down anywhere traceable. How did he— "We're thorough," Ju-won said, reading her expression. "Consider the offer. You have until Friday." She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against marble. "I'm not for sale. Everyone's for sale, Miss Bell." Yoon's smile was a slash across his face. "It's just a matter of price. We'll be in touch about the alternative arrangements if you decline." Lakeisha walked out on shaking legs, the bass vibrating through her chest like a second heartbeat. Behind her, she didn't see Ju-won's gaze following her retreat, something unreadable flickering behind his cold exterior. 2 days later, Lakeisha found her salon trashed, windows shattered, hair products dumped across the floor, a message spray-painted across the mirror in red. Tick-tock. Her roommate, Blessing, a Nigerian nursing student, found her sitting in the wreckage, hands buried in her natural curls. "Keisha, what happened? Should we call the police?" "No police," Lakeisha whispered. "The police couldn't touch men like Yoon Tae-sung. She'd learned that lesson in Lagos, watching her abusers walk free after serving 18 months for what they'd done to her and 2 other women." Her phone buzzed. A photo message. Her elementary students leaving school. A black sedan parked across the street, too close. The threat was clear. That night, Lakeisha called the number Yoon had given her. "I'll do it," she said, the words tasting like ash. "I'll marry him." "Excellent choice, Miss Bell. The ceremony is tomorrow at 6 p.m. A car will collect you." Click. Lakeisha sat on her apartment floor, rain hammering against the window, and wondered if she was trading one prison for another. But at least this prison came with an exit date. 6 months. She'd survived worse. She'd survived this. She just didn't know yet that Lee Ju-won wasn't the monster she should fear. The wedding took place in a private estate in Pyeongchang-dong, where Seoul's wealthiest buried their secrets behind high walls and manicured gardens. Lakeisha arrived in a designer hanbok, traditional Korean wedding dress in ivory and gold, that had been tailored to fit her curves perfectly, clearly prepared before she'd even agreed. The message was clear. Her consent had been a formality. The officiant droned through the ceremony in formal Korean. Lakeisha understood enough to catch the weight of the vows, the binding nature of the contract. When prompted, she said nay in a voice that didn't waver, even as her hands trembled. Then came the moment when the groom lifts the veil. Lakeisha had kept her eyes downcast, focusing on breathing, on surviving the next moment and then the next. But when Lee Ju-won's hands, warm, surprisingly gentle, lifted the delicate fabric from her face and she looked up into those midnight eyes, she saw something that made her breath catch. Recognition, not of her face, but of her situation. A flicker of something almost like regret before his expression shuddered back to stone. "You look beautiful," he said quietly, and she hated that he sounded sincere. The kiss was brief, formal, his lips barely brushing hers, but even that momentary contact sent an unwelcome jolt through her system. Not attraction exactly, but awareness. This man was danger incarnate, and she'd just bound herself to him. The reception was equally cold. Guests congratulated Ju-won with tight smiles and envious glares at Lakeisha, who stood beside him like an exotic acquisition. She caught fragments of whispered Korean. Foreign woman. Unusual choice. Wonder what he sees in her. Probably a fling. Let them wonder. She'd be gone in 6 months. But as Ju-won led her to the black Mercedes waiting to take them to his estate, his hand settled on the small of her back, proprietary and warm through the silk. He leaned close, his breath ghosting against her ear. "The performance starts now, Lakeisha. In public, you're my devoted wife. In private, you're free to hate me. But never, ever try to run. The consequences would be unfortunate." She met his eyes, her own blazing with defiance she couldn't quite suppress. "I agreed to 6 months, not a second more." His smile was sharp as a knife. "We'll see." The Mercedes pulled away from the estate, carrying Lakeisha toward a gilded cage she'd willingly entered. She watched Seoul's lights blur past the tinted windows and wondered, not for the first time, if survival was worth the price she'd just paid. Behind them, Yoon Tae-sung watched the car disappear, exchanging a loaded glance with a woman in the shadows, Hana, Ju-won's partner in the organization. Her expression was unreadable, but her hand clenched tight around her champagne glass until the stem cracked. "This won't end well," Hana murmured. "It never does," Yoon replied. "That's what makes it interesting." The trap had closed, and Lakeisha Bell had no idea that the real danger wasn't the man she'd married. It was the ones who'd engineered the marriage in the first place. The Hanam-dong estate sprawled across a hillside like a sleeping dragon, all clean lines and floor-to-ceiling windows that offered panoramic views of the Han River. Lakeisha had seen wealthy homes before, but this was something else. Minimalist luxury that whispered rather than shouted its price tag. Everything was black, white, or gray, from the Italian marble floors to the custom furniture that probably cost more than she'd earn in a lifetime. A housekeeper, an older woman named Mrs. Beck, who spoke no English, led Lakeisha to the master bedroom on the 3rd floor. The space was enormous, dominated by a king-sized bed with charcoal silk sheets and a sitting area that overlooked the glittering city below. Her suitcase, the battered thing she'd brought from her apartment, looked obscene against all this perfection. Li Ju-wan appeared in the doorway 20 minutes later, having shed his wedding jacket for a simple black t-shirt that revealed the full extent of his tattoos. Dragons coiling up both arms, disappearing beneath the fabric. He looked younger this way, less like a mafia boss, and more like the dangerous men who'd lurked in Lagos nightclubs, the ones Lakeisha had learned to avoid. "Your things will be moved to the guest room down the hall," he said without preamble, pouring himself whiskey from the bar cart. "I don't share a bed unless I choose to. This room is mine." Relief and indignation warred in Lakeisha's chest. "Fine by me. I don't want to be anywhere near you." Something flickered across his face. Amusement, maybe? Good. We understand each other. He downed the whiskey in one smooth motion. Rules. You don't leave the estate without security. You don't speak to media. You attend events when I require it. Play the loving wife and keep your mouth shut about business. In exchange, you're fed, clothed, and safe. Break the rules, face consequences. Simple. "I'm not a dog," Lakeisha snapped, her accent thickening with anger. Ghanaian inflections bleeding through the British English she'd perfected. "I'm a human being who got trapped by circumstances. Don't talk to me like I'm property." Ju-wan set down his glass with a sharp click, his eyes hardening. In 3 strides, he crossed the space between them, invading her personal bubble until she could smell his cologne, something dark and woody that made her pulse kick up despite herself. He wasn't touching her, but his proximity was a threat all its own. "You are property, Lakeisha," he said softly, each word precisely enunciated. "You're an asset I purchased to solve a problem. The moment you walked into Songdo Club, you became part of my world, and in my world, assets that malfunction get liquidated." She should have been terrified. Part of her was. But a larger part, the part that had survived Lagos, that had rebuilt herself from nothing, refused to cower. "Then liquidate me, because I won't be broken again. I've already been through hell. Your threats are just noise." For a long moment, they stood locked in a silent battle of wills, her brown eyes blazing into his black ones. Then, unexpectedly, Ju-wan stepped back, something shifting in his expression. "You're not what I expected," he said, and this time his voice lacked that razor edge. "Most women in your position would be crying or begging by now." "I'm not most women," Lakeisha replied, forcing her heartbeat to slow. "I learned a long time ago that tears don't stop monsters. Action does. So if we're stuck in this arrangement, here's my rule. Respect goes both ways, or you'll have 6 months of hell. Your choice." A smile ghosted across his lips, there and gone. "I think I'm starting to understand why my background check flagged you as difficult." "Your background check doesn't know half of what I survived," Lakeisha said quietly. "Those men in Lagos, they thought they owned me too, but I'm still here, and they're rotting in their own misery. Remember that." Ju-wan studied her for another heartbeat, then nodded once. "Your room is 2 doors down. Mrs. Bake will show you. Breakfast is at 7. Don't be late. I hate tardiness." He moved toward the door, then paused. "And Lakeisha, that fire in you, keep it. You'll need it." He left, and Lakeisha released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Her hands were shaking, adrenaline crash hitting hard. She'd just challenged a mafia boss in his own home. Either she was brave or suicidal. Time would tell which. The first week passed in a strange, suspended reality. Lakeisha's days developed a rhythm. Wake at 6, avoid Ju-wan at breakfast by eating earlier, spend mornings reading in the extensive library, afternoons wandering the estate's gardens under the watchful eyes of security, evenings alone in her room. The guest bedroom was smaller than the master, but still luxurious. Queen bed with Egyptian cotton sheets, ensuite bathroom with a tub big enough to swim in, and a walk-in closet that had been stocked with designer clothes in her exact size. Everything fit perfectly, Everything was expensive. Everything felt like chains wrapped in velvet. Ju-Wan was largely absent, conducting his business in the city. When their paths crossed, they maintained icy politeness. He didn't threaten her again, but his presence alone was reminder enough of the power dynamic. It was on the 8th night that Lakeisha woke to sounds from the master bedroom, breaking glass, a shouted curse in Korean, then silence. She lay in her bed debating. Not her problem, not her business, but something, maybe stupidity, maybe curiosity, made her slip out of bed and pad down the hallway in her sleep shirt and shorts. The master bedroom door was ajar. Through the gap she could see Ju-Wan sitting on the floor beside his bed, surrounded by broken whiskey bottle fragments, his head in his hands. Blood dripped from his right palm where he'd apparently cut it. "You're bleeding," Lakeisha said from the doorway. His head snapped up, eyes wild for a moment before recognition settled in. "I didn't hear you." His voice was rough, raw in a way she'd never heard. "You're drunk." Astute observation, but he didn't move to get up, just stared at the blood pooling in his palm like he'd forgotten how injuries worked. Against her better judgment, Lakeisha entered the room and crouched beside him, carefully avoiding the glass. "Let me see. I've patched up worse in worse places," she interrupted, gently taking his hand. The cut was deep but clean, slicing across his palm below the thumb. "Do you have a first aid kit?" He gestured vaguely toward the bathroom. Lakeisha retrieved it, then set about cleaning and bandaging the wound with practiced efficiency. She'd learned field medicine by necessity in Lagos after the attacks, when hospitals asked too many questions. Ju-Wan watched her work in silence, his breathing gradually evening out. This close, she could see details she'd missed before. A scar through his left eyebrow, the fine lines around his eyes that suggested he was older than his smooth skin implied, maybe mid-30s. And something else, exhaustion so bone-deep it radiated off him like heat. "Why are you helping me?" he asked quietly. Lakeisha tied off the bandage with more force than necessary. "Because I'm not cruel. Unlike some people. I haven't been cruel to you." She met his eyes, her own hardening. "You bought me like livestock to solve your image problem. That's pretty cruel where I come from." "I saved you from your father's debt," he countered, but there was no heat in it. "Just weariness. You trapped me in a different cage," Lakeisha replied. She should have gotten up and left. Instead, she found herself asking, "Why do you drink alone in the dark?" For a long moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, ghosts. We all have them. It was the most human thing he'd said to her, and against every instinct screaming at her to maintain distance, Lakeisha understood. "Lagos gave me mine. What gave you yours?" Ju-Wan's laugh was bitter. "Soul, family, this life." He gestured vaguely at the opulent room. "Everything I built, everyone I've killed to build it. You think this empire doesn't have a price? Then why do it?" "Because I'm good at it." He looked at her, really looked, and Lakeisha saw something crack in his armor. "My father was a loan shark, small time. He taught me young, the world is predators and prey. I decided I'd rather be the predator. Now I own half the clubs in Gangnam, run protection for businesses in 4 districts, and politicians return my calls. Success." The word dripped with self-loathing. Lakeisha sat back on her heels, processing. This wasn't the monster she'd built in her head. This was just a man drowning in choices he couldn't undo. It didn't excuse anything, didn't make her situation less fucked, but it complicated things. "The men who hurt me in Lagos," she said slowly, choosing words carefully, "they were predators too. They took turns because they could, because I was alone and vulnerable, and they faced no consequences. One of them was a police officer. Another was my mother's friend. The third was my boyfriend." Ju-Wan's eyes sharpened, the drunk haze receding. "Jesus. I testified anyway, put them in court, told the world what they'd done. They got 18 months, out in 12 for good behavior. And I got death threats. My family disowned me for bringing shame, and I had to flee to another continent to feel safe again. Lakeisha stood, brushing off her shorts. So when you talk about predators and prey, I know exactly what you mean. I've been prey. Now I'm just trying to be neither. She moved toward the door, then paused. Clean up the glass before you sleep. I'm not bandaging you again. Lakeisha, his voice stopped her. Those men, the ones from Lagos, if I could find them. Don't, she said sharply. I'm not asking for your vengeance. I'm not asking for anything except my freedom when this contract ends. But as she walked back to her room, she couldn't shake the look in Ju-won's eyes when she'd told him, like he was calculating coordinates to 3 different targets across international borders. And buried beneath her anger, a small traitorous part of her thought, what would justice look like if someone with real power actually cared? She crushed that thought before it could take root. Dangerous thinking. Ju-won wasn't her savior, he was her captor. Nothing more. The next morning, Lakeisha found an envelope outside her door. Inside, newspaper clippings, police reports, and photographs. 3 men, the ones from Lagos. All recent articles, dated within the last month. Officer Chukwu, arrested for corruption, facing 20 years. James Adewale, business collapsed, bankrupt, wife left. David Mensah, hospitalized after accident, permanently disabled. No note, no explanation. But when Lakeisha came down for breakfast, Ju-won was already there, drinking coffee and reading the news on his tablet. His right hand was properly bandaged now, professionally done. Sleep well? He asked, without looking up, his tone neutral. Lakeisha set the envelope on the table between them. This was you. I have resources, I use them. He met her eyes, his own unreadable. Consider it a wedding gift. I told you not to ask my permission. I didn't. He returned to his tablet. Those men hurt you because they could. Now they're paying because I could. The world balances out. Lakeisha should have been horrified, should have condemned this vigilante justice. But staring at the photographs of her abusers finally facing consequences, real consequences that would follow them for life, all she felt was a dangerous, intoxicating satisfaction. Thank you, she whispered before she could stop herself. Ju-won's eyes flicked up, surprise flickering across his features. Then he nodded once, acknowledgement passing between them, and returned to his coffee. Something shifted in that moment. The bars of Lakeisha's cage didn't disappear, but they felt less suffocating, and the man on the other side of them became impossibly more complicated. 3 weeks into the arrangement, Lakeisha met Hannah. The woman appeared one afternoon while Lakeisha was reading in the library, a first-edition translation of Things Fall Apart she'd found tucked between Korean business volumes. Hannah entered without knocking, her presence announced by the sharp click of Louboutin heels against marble. She was beautiful in that soul-specific way. Pale skin, delicate features, expensive plastic surgery done so well it looked natural. Designer everything from her Chanel suit to her Hermes bag. But it was her eyes that caught Lakeisha's attention. Cold, calculating, assessing Lakeisha like one might examine produce at a market. "So you're the bride," Hannah said in perfect English, her accent American educated. "I'm Hannah, Ju-won's partner." "Business partner?" Lakeisha asked, setting down her book but not standing. She'd learned in Lagos that showing deference to hostile women only encouraged them. Hannah's smile was a blade. "Among other things, we've worked together for 8 years, built this empire from nothing. Before you, I was the one people expected him to marry." "Ah, that explained the venom." "I'm not here by choice," Lakeisha said evenly. "This is a contract. 6 months, then I'm gone. So whatever threat you're about to make about staying away from him or knowing my place, save it. I know exactly where I stand." Something flickered in Hannah's eyes. Respect, maybe, or reassessment. She moved to the window, looking out over the estate grounds. You're different from what I expected. Most women in your position would be either terrified or gold digging. You seem neither. I'm surviving, Lakeisha replied. It's what I do. Juwan told me about Lagos. Hana's tone shifted, losing some of its edge. What happened to you, and what he did about it. Lakeisha tensed. He shouldn't have told you that. He tells me everything. We don't have secrets. Hana turned, and her expression was complex, jealousy mixed with something like curiosity. He's never intervened in someone's personal vendetta before, never used organization resources for something so sentimental. You intrigue him. I'm a contract obligation, nothing more. Keep telling yourself that. Hana's smile returned, sharp as ever. But I've known him a long time. I've seen how he looks at you when you're not watching, like you're a puzzle he can't solve. She moved toward the door, paused. A word of advice from one woman navigating this world to another. Don't fall for him. Juwan destroys everything he touches. It's not malice, it's just who he is. The best thing you can do is serve your 6 months and run. After she left, Lakeisha sat in the library for a long time, Hana's words echoing. She hadn't imagined the complexity between them. Ex-lovers, maybe, or unrequited feelings on Hana's side. Either way, it added another layer of complication to an already impossible situation. But Hana was wrong about one thing. Lakeisha wasn't in danger of falling for Lee Ju-won. She was in danger of understanding him. And understanding, she'd learned, was the first step toward caring. She needed to be more careful. The first public appearance as Ju-won's wife came 2 days later, a charity gala at the Sheila Hotel benefiting children's hospitals. Lakeisha wore a crimson gown that had been delivered that afternoon, form-fitting with an elegant train, her natural hair styled in an updo that took Mrs. Beck 3 hours to perfect. Diamond earrings, real ones Ju-won had noted casually, completed the look. When she descended the stairs, Ju-won was waiting in the foyer, devastating in a custom tuxedo. His eyes traveled over her slowly, appreciation clear in his expression. "You'll be the most beautiful woman there," he said quietly. "I'm the decoration on your arm," Lakeisha replied, but there was less venom in it than before. Might as well be an attractive one. In the limousine, Ju-won briefed her on who would be attending. Politicians, chaebol heirs, fellow crime bosses masquerading as legitimate businessmen. Smile, nod, let me do the talking. If anyone asks about our relationship, we met through mutual friends, fell in love quickly, married despite cultural differences because love conquers all. The sarcasm in his voice was palpable. Love conquers all, right, Lakeisha repeated dryly. Can you sell it? She turned to look at him fully. I survived 3 men assaulting me and put them in court afterward. I rebuilt my life in a foreign country with no family support. I think I can pretend to love my husband for a few hours. Something passed across his face. Admiration, maybe. You're stronger than most of my men. Your men haven't had to be. The gala was exactly as oppressive as Lakeisha anticipated. Curious stares followed them everywhere, whispers trailing in their wake. She caught fragments of Korean, his African wife. Unusual choice. Wonder how long it'll last. She'd become fluent enough in the language over the years to understand she was being discussed like a fascinating exotic pet. Ju-won's hand stayed firm on her waist, possessive and warm. To outsiders, they looked like besotted newlyweds. Only Lakeisha felt the tension in his grip, the performance beneath the performance. They were circulating through the crowd when a drunk businessman, some chaebol heir with too much soju in his system, blocked their path. "Ju-won-si," he slurred in Korean, swaying. "Introduce me to your beautiful bride." "Assemblyman Park," Ju-won replied coolly. "This is my wife, Lakeisha." Park's eyes raked over her in a way that made Lakeisha's skin crawl. The same predatory assessment she'd endured in Lagos, in Ghana, in too many places. Such an exotic choice. Tell me, does she speak Korean, or is she just for decoration? Lakeisha felt Ju-won tense beside her, but before he could respond, she stepped forward, switching to flawless Korean. I speak it well enough to know you just insulted me, Assemblyman Park, and I'm educated enough to know that men who drink too much often say things they'll regret in the morning. Perhaps you should get some water. Park's face flushed crimson, whether from alcohol or embarrassment, unclear. Around them, several people had stopped to listen, including Hana, who watched from across the room with an unreadable expression. I didn't mean, Park stammered. Of course you didn't, Lakeisha said smoothly, switching back to English, her smile pleasant and absolutely deadly. Just a cultural misunderstanding. Now if you'll excuse us, my husband and I were just leaving. She took Ju-won's arm and steered him away, feeling the weight of dozens of eyes following their exit. Once they were in a quiet corridor, Ju-won stopped her, turning to face her with an expression she couldn't quite read. That was necessary, Lakeisha finished. I'm not going to stand there and let drunk men disrespect me. Not anymore. If that damages your reputation, I'm sorry, but I'm done being quiet. To her shock, Ju-won smiled, a real smile, reaching his eyes. That was perfect. Park's been trying to undermine me for months. You just humiliated him in front of half of Seoul's political elite. He laughed, the sound genuine and surprised. You're magnificent when you're angry. Lakeisha felt heat creep up her neck that had nothing to do with the champagne she'd been sipping. I just did what I had to do. No, Ju-won said, his hand coming up to cup her cheek, a gesture so unexpected and gentle that Lakeisha froze. You did what you wanted to do. There's a difference. And it was extraordinary. For a moment they stood like that, his hand warm against her skin, something electric and dangerous crackling between them. Then Hana appeared at the end of the corridor, her expression carefully neutral. We should go. There's a situation that needs your attention. Ju-won dropped his hand, the moment shattering. I'll be right there. He looked at Lakeisha. Take the car home. I'll catch a ride with Hana. After he left, Lakeisha stood alone in the corridor, her cheek still tingling where he'd touched her, her heart doing complicated things in her chest. Don't fall for him, Hana's voice echoed. He destroys everything he touches. Lakeisha pressed her palm against the cool marble wall, forcing her breathing to steady. This was just a contract, just a performance. The warmth in his eyes when he'd called her magnificent meant nothing. It had to mean nothing, because if it meant something, she was in far more danger than she'd ever imagined. The situation Hana had mentioned turned out to be a territory dispute with a rival organization. Ju-won didn't return until 3 a.m., and when he did, Lakeisha heard him in the shower for nearly an hour. She didn't ask about it the next morning, and he didn't volunteer information, but their dynamic had shifted after the gala. Conversations lasted longer than strictly necessary. He started joining her for breakfast, discussing books she was reading, asking about her life before Seoul. She found herself looking forward to those mornings, to the way his eyes crinkled when she made him laugh, to the intelligence behind his dangerous exterior. It was week 5 when everything changed. Lakeisha awoke at 2 a.m. to voices raised in argument somewhere downstairs. Her Korean had improved enough to catch fragments of, "You can't keep doing this," Hana's voice, sharp with anger. "My decision," Ju-won cold and final. "Going to get yourself killed." Curiosity won over caution. Lakeisha slipped out of bed, padding silently down the hallway to the main staircase. Below, in Ju-won's study, she could see them through the partially open door. Hana pacing like a caged animal, Ju-won behind his desk, his face carved from stone. "The Hwang family will not tolerate this expansion," Hana said in Korean, her voice tight. "You're pushing too hard, too fast. And for what? To prove something to the organization? To her? Leave Lakeisha out of this." "She's already in this," Hana snapped. "Everything's changed since you married her. You're distracted, making reckless decisions. I'm making strategic decisions. You intervened in Lagos, used organization resources for personal revenge. That's not strategy, that's emotion." Hana slammed her hands on the desk. The old Ju-won would never have done that. The old Ju-won knew better than to care. Silence stretched. Then, maybe the old Ju-won was missing something. Hana's laugh was bitter. "She's a contract bride who'll be gone in a month. Don't fool yourself into thinking it's more." Lakeisha should have retreated, should have returned to bed before they discovered her eavesdropping. Instead, she found herself frozen, Ju-won's words echoing. Maybe the old Ju-won was missing something. She was saved from discovery by the sudden arrival of another man, Yoon Tae-sung, the one who delivered the original ultimatum at Songdo Club. He burst through the front entrance, his usually composed demeanor shattered. "We have a problem," he announced in Korean. "The Hwangs hid one of our warehouses, 4 men dead, shipment stolen." The room's energy shifted immediately, all previous arguments forgotten. Lakeisha watched Ju-won transform from the man who'd held her face gently at the gala into something cold and lethal. "Assemble the crew," he ordered. "I want locations on every Hwang property by dawn." "This is war," Hana said quietly. "If we retaliate, there's no going back." They crossed the line. Ju-won's voice could have frozen water. "We respond or we look weak. Weakness in this business is death." He moved toward the door, then seemed to sense Lakeisha's presence. His eyes found hers on the staircase, and for a moment his expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Go back to bed," he said gently. "This doesn't concern you." But it did concern her, because she'd heard Hana's accusation that Ju-won was distracted because of her, making reckless choices. And if his distraction got him killed, Lakeisha would be alone in a world that saw her as nothing more than a foreign widow, unprotected and vulnerable. She returned to her room, but didn't sleep. At dawn, she heard vehicles leaving the estate. Multiple cars, armed men, the machinery of violence rolling into motion. Ju-won didn't return for 3 days. Lakeisha spent that time in a state of suspended anxiety she hated herself for feeling. She shouldn't care if he lived or died. He was her captor, not her friend. The contract meant nothing beyond paper and ink. But she thought of his smile when she'd humiliated Park, his gentle touch on her cheek, the way he'd avenged Lagos without being asked. Actions that suggested he saw her as more than an asset. "Don't fall for him," Hana had warned. Too late, a traitorous voice in Lakeisha's head whispered. When Ju-won finally returned, it was late evening on the 3rd day. Lakeisha was in the library when she heard the front door open, heard Mrs. Beck's exclamation of concern in rapid Korean. She found him in the foyer, borne by Yoon, blood staining his white shirt, his face pale beneath its usual tan. A gash split his left eyebrow, and he moved with the careful precision of someone trying not to show how much they hurt. "I'm fine," he was telling Mrs. Beck in Korean, waving off her fussing. "Just need to clean up." "You're bleeding," Lakeisha said from the stairs, echoing her words from weeks ago when she'd found him drunk among broken glass. His eyes found hers, and something passed between them. Recognition, relief, something deeper. "It's not as bad as it looks. That's what they always say right before they collapse," Lakeisha replied, coming down to take his other side from Yoon. "Where's the medical kit?" "I can handle this," Ju-won started. "Shut up and let me help you." They got him to the master bedroom, where Lakeisha discovered the extent of the damage. The eyebrow gash, bruised ribs, what looked like a knife wound across his left shoulder blade, shallow but angry. "What the hell happened?" she demanded, cleaning the shoulder wound with practiced hands, while Ju-won sat shirtless on the edge of his bed, jaw clenched against pain. "Hwang family sent a message. We sent one back. It's handled." "Handled," Lakeisha repeated flatly. "You look like you got hit by a truck." "You should see them." Despite everything, she laughed, sharp and short. "You're insane." "Maybe." He turned his head to look at her, wincing at the movement. "But I'm alive, and you're still here. Where else would I be? I'm contractually obligated. You could have run while I was gone. No one would have stopped you." Lakeisha paused in her bandaging, the truth of his words sinking in. She could have left, could have grabbed her passport and disappeared into Seoul's foreign district, found a way back to Ghana or somewhere entirely else. The thought had crossed her mind, but she hadn't. "I keep my word," she said instead, finishing the bandage, "even when I don't want to." Ju-won caught her hand before she could pull away, his grip firm despite his injuries. "Lakeisha, why are you really still here?" It was the question she'd been avoiding asking herself for weeks. The truth sat heavy on her tongue. "Because when I'm with you, I feel less alone than I have in years. Because you saw what was done to me and cared enough to make it right. Because somewhere between hatred and survival, I started to actually like you." But saying any of that would be admitting defeat, would be acknowledging that Hana had been right. She was falling for the man who'd bought her like property. "Because I have nowhere else to go," she lied, pulling her hand from his grip. "And because this contract ends in 3 weeks, I can survive 3 more weeks." Something like disappointment flickered in Ju-won's eyes before he shuddered it away. "Right, 3 weeks." Lakeisha left him there, bandaged and bleeding, and looking far too human for her peace of mind. In her own room, she pressed her back against the door and tried to remember all the reasons why caring about Lee Ju-won was the worst possible choice she could make. The list kept getting shorter. The next 2 weeks passed in a strange, tense intimacy. Ju-won recovered from his injuries, and Lakeisha found herself spending more time in his orbit, sharing meals, watching him work from the corner of his study, listening to him take calls in Korean, and slowly beginning to understand the complexity of his empire. He wasn't just a thug with guns. He was a strategist, a businessman, someone who'd built something real from nothing. It didn't excuse the violence, but it explained the pride. And he, in turn, began asking her questions about Lagos, about her dreams before everything fell apart, about what she wanted after the contract ended. "I want to open a cultural center," she admitted one evening over wine on the terrace, the Han River glittering below them. "Somewhere African women in Seoul can come for support, language classes, job training. We're invisible here half the time, or worse, fetishized. I want to create space where we're just human." Ju-won listened with an intensity that made her nervous. "I could fund that. After the 6 months, give you startup capital." "No," Lakeisha interrupted. "I don't want your money. I want to build it myself. Clean money from clean work. Otherwise, it's just another cage, even if it's golden." "You're stubborn. You're controlling." They smiled at each other, and Lakeisha felt that dangerous warmth spreading through her chest again. This was how it happened, she realized, not with grand gestures or declarations, but with quiet moments on terraces, with understanding passing between damaged people who recognized themselves in each other. It was Hana who shattered the illusion. She appeared at the estate one afternoon in the final week of the contract, her expression grim. Lakeisha was in the garden when she heard raised voices from inside, Hana and Ju-won, arguing again. "Can't be serious," Hana's voice carried through the open windows. "I'm extending the contract." "For how long? Forever? She's not one of us, Ju-won." Lakeisha froze among the roses, Hana's words piercing through her. "She could be," Ju-won said, and Lakeisha heard something in his voice she'd never heard before. Hope. Dangerous, desperate hope. If she wanted, she doesn't want this life. She's counting down days until she can escape you. Hana's laugh was cruel. You think she cares about you? You bought her, Ju-won. She'll never forgive that, never forget. The moment that contract ends, she's gone, and you'll be left with nothing but your pride and your violence. Silence. Then, get out. I'm trying to protect you. I said, get out. Lakeisha retreated further into the garden, her heart hammering. Was Hana right? Was everything between them, the conversations, the laughter, the charged moments, just Lakeisha making the best of captivity? No, it had become more than that. Somewhere along the way, it had become real. But real didn't mean possible. Real didn't mean they could build something lasting from a foundation of coercion and violence. That night, Lakeisha made her decision. She would honor the contract until its end date, 4 more days, and then she would leave. Clean break, no looking back. It was the smart choice, the safe choice, the choice that already felt like tearing her own heart out. The crisis came on day 2 of the final 4. Lakeisha was in the library when Yoon Tae-sung burst through the front door shouting for Mrs. Beck in urgent Korean. Lakeisha caught fragments: underground garage, ambush, Ju-won. Her blood turned to ice. She raced to the foyer, where Yoon was on his phone, barking orders. When he saw her, his expression shifted, guilt and panic warring across his features. What happened? Lakeisha demanded in Korean. Hwang family retaliation, Yoon replied, switching to English. They hit our warehouse district. Ju-won and Hana went to assess damage. There was a trap, shooters waiting. We got separated. Hana made it out, but Ju-won, his voice cracked. He's in the underground parking garage at the warehouse, pinned down. Gunshot wound to the abdomen, bleeding badly. Where's Hana? Medical team? Hana's on her way to the hospital, took a bullet to the shoulder. The regular doctor? Yoon's face was ashen. He's in Japan, unreachable, and Ju-won won't let us call anyone else. Says the organization has rules, no outsiders, too risky, could expose operations. Lakeisha stared at him. So he's just going to bleed out because of rules? Hana refused to call the emergency contact, the black market doctor Ju-won uses for the truly secret operations. She says it's too dangerous, that the doctor could betray us to the Hwangs. Yoon ran his hands through his hair. But without help, Ju-won could die before we can get him anywhere safe. The world narrowed to a single point of clarity. Lakeisha had survived Lagos because she'd learned when to follow rules and when to burn them down. This was a burning moment. Give me his phone, she ordered. What? His encrypted phone, the one with his emergency contacts. Give it to me now. Yoon hesitated only a second before producing the device from his jacket. Lakeisha unlocked it. She'd watched Ju-won enter his code enough times to memorize the pattern and scrolled through contacts until she found what she needed. Dr. Han, emergency only. She dialed without hesitation. A gruff voice answered in Korean. This better be worth my time. Underground warehouse, Seonadong District, parking level 2, Lakeisha said, her Korean steady despite her racing pulse. Gunshot wound, abdominal, severe bleeding. Get here in 20 minutes or your best client dies. Who the hell is this? Where's Ju-won? I'm his wife and he's unconscious, Lakeisha lied smoothly. 20 minutes, doctor, or I'll make sure everyone knows the great Dr. Han let Lee Ju-won bleed out over protocol. Move. She hung up before he could argue, then turned to Yoon. Take me to him, now. The warehouse district was a maze of industrial buildings and shadows, the kind of place where violence happened without witnesses. Yoon drove like a demon through Seoul's streets, his usually composed face tight with fear. If the doctor doesn't come, he started. He'll come, Lakeisha said with more confidence than she felt. I gave him no choice. They pulled into the underground garage to find chaos. 2 bodies on the ground. Hwang soldiers, Yoon explained. Bullet holes, spiderwebbing concrete pillars, and the sharp smell of gunpowder mixing with something metallic. Blood. Juwon was slumped against his Mercedes near the far wall, his white shirt soaked crimson from the wound in his lower left abdomen. His face was ashen, lips pressed tight against pain, his gun still gripped in his right hand. When he saw Lakeisha emerge from the car, confusion flickered across his features. "What? How?" he managed, before pain cut off the words. Lakeisha dropped to her knees beside him, her hands immediately going to assess the wound. It was bad, bleeding profusely, the bullet likely still inside. Her field medicine training from Lagos kicked in, her mind cataloging what needed to happen. Pressure, elevation, keep him conscious, prevent shock. "I called Dr. Han," she said, pressing her wadded jacket against the wound. Juwon hissed in pain, but didn't pull away. "You did what?" His eyes widened. "Lakeisha, no, that contact is forbidden. Only I can authorize." "You're bleeding out," she interrupted sharply. "Your partner refused to call for help, so I made the choice. You can fire me from this fake marriage later if you survive." "Hana was right to refuse," Juwon gasped, his hand covering hers on the wound, his grip weak. "Dr. Han is connected to rival families. If he tells them I'm vulnerable, then we'll handle it when it happens. Right now, you need a doctor or you're dead. Everything else is secondary." He stared at her, something shifting in his eyes, recognition of what she'd just risked, what it meant that she'd broken his organization's rules to save him. "Why?" he whispered. "The contract's almost over. You could have just let me die, walked away free." Lakeisha felt tears prick her eyes, unexpected and unwelcome. "Because I care about you, you idiot," she said, the admission ripping out of her like confession. "I wasn't supposed to. I fought against it. But somewhere between your avenging Lagos and you calling me magnificent and these stupid breakfasts where you actually listened to me, I started to care. So no, I couldn't just let you die, even if it's the smart choice." Juwon's hand tightened over hers, his blood warm and wet between their interlaced fingers. "Lakeisha, don't," she said, voice breaking. "Don't say anything romantic or profound. You're in shock and bleeding and—" The screech of tires announced Dr. Han's arrival. The doctor emerged from a nondescript van, medical bag in hand, his face grim and professional. He took one look at the scene and started barking orders at Yoon in Korean. Lights, tools, clear a space. For the next 40 minutes, Lakeisha held Juwon's hand while Dr. Han worked, extracting the bullet, stitching vessels, administering blood plasma from supplies in his van. Juwon drifted in and out of consciousness, his grip on Lakeisha's hand the only thing anchoring him. When it was done, Dr. Han stood, wiping blood from his hands. "He'll live, but he needs hospital care within 24 hours. This is just enough to stabilize him." He fixed Lakeisha with a sharp look. "You're the wife who called?" "Yes." "You've got steel in your spine, demanding I come like that." Juwon chose well. He packed his equipment. "But tell him we're even now. I don't make house calls for anyone anymore after this. Too dangerous for all of us." After the doctor left, Lakeisha and Yoon got Juwon into the car. He was conscious now, pale but stable, his dark eyes fixed on Lakeisha's face as she sat beside him in the back seat. "You saved my life," he said quietly. "You saved mine first," Lakeisha replied. "In Lagos. In different ways here. We're even. I don't think we'll ever be even." His hand found hers again, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "Lakeisha, when the contract ends in 2 days—" "Don't," she interrupted, pulling her hand away. "Don't ask me to stay, please." Pain flickered across his face that had nothing to do with his gunshot wound. "Why not?" "Because this," she gestured between them, at the blood on her clothes, at the violence surrounding them. "This isn't sustainable. Today you got shot. Tomorrow it could be worse. And I can't—" her voice cracked. "I can't watch someone I care about die in this world. I've already lost too much to violence. I won't lose more." "I could leave," Juwon said desperately. "Leave the organization. Start over." You'd be hunted, you know that, and you'd resent me eventually for taking you away from what you built. Lakeisha forced herself to meet his eyes. What we have is real, Juwan. I'm not denying that anymore, but real doesn't mean possible. Sometimes real just means painful. The car ride back to the estate passed in heavy silence, the weight of unsaid words pressing down on both of them. Juwan recovered quickly, his body younger and more resilient than his lifestyle suggested. By the final day of the contract, he was moving around the estate with only slight stiffness, the wound healing cleanly thanks to Dr. Han's skill. Lakeisha spent that last day packing her meager belongings. She was leaving behind all the designer clothes, the jewelry, everything Juwan had provided. She'd take only what she'd brought, her battered suitcase, her books, her dignity. He found her in the guest room that evening, watching the sunset paint the Han River gold and crimson. "You're really leaving," he said from the doorway, not a question. "The contract ends at midnight. I'll be gone by morning." Juwan moved into the room, and Lakeisha was struck again by how beautiful he was, dangerous and damaged, and somehow still capable of softness when he looked at her. "I'm extending your payment. 500 million won instead of 200, enough to start your cultural center and live comfortably for years. I told you I don't want. It's not charity, it's payment for saving my life." His eyes held hers. "You broke my organization's rules, risked exposure from Dr. Han, and made a choice that Hana, my partner of 8 years, wouldn't make. That's worth more than money can measure, but it's all I have to give." Lakeisha felt tears threaten again. "Juwan, I'm not asking you to stay anymore," his voice rough with emotion he wasn't bothering to hide. "You're right, this world would destroy you, and I care about you too much to watch that happen. But I need you to know, what we had, even if it started wrong, even if it was built on a contract and coercion, it became real for me. You became real for me. You became real for me too," Lakeisha whispered. "That's why I have to go." He crossed the distance between them in 3 strides, and then his hands were cupping her face, his forehead resting against hers. "Can I kiss you?" he asked, his breath ghosting across her lips. "One last time, not for performance or contracts, just for us." She should have said no, should have maintained distance, kept this clean. Instead, she breathed, "Yes." The kiss was soft and devastating, full of all the things they couldn't say, gratitude and regret, and a tenderness that hurt more than violence ever could. Lakeisha felt tears slip down her cheeks, tasted salt mixing with the kiss, and when they finally pulled apart, she saw wetness on Juwan's face too. "Be safe," he whispered. "Be happy. Build your center. Help your community. And if you ever need anything, anything at all, you call me. That's not a contract obligation. That's a promise." "I will," Lakeisha lied, knowing she'd never call, knowing that clean breaks were the only kind that healed right. She left at dawn, while Juwan was still sleeping, or pretending to sleep. She couldn't be sure. Yoon drove her to the airport in silence, pressed an envelope into her hands at departures. Inside, a bank card, documentation for the 500 million won, and a handwritten note in Juwan's precise script. "Thank you for seeing me as human. No one else ever has. J." Lakeisha boarded the plane to Accra with tears streaming down her face and a heart full of a love she'd never be able to claim. The Lagos Women's Cultural Center opened in Itaewon on a rainy Tuesday. Its doors painted the vibrant colors of the African diaspora: gold, green, red, and black. Lakeisha stood in the main room, watching women file in for the first workshop, Korean language lessons taught by volunteers, job training programs funded by clean grants she'd secured through legitimate channels. She'd used Juwan's money carefully, half for the center, half invested for sustainability. She hadn't touched a won for personal use. That felt important somehow, keeping this dream separate from that world. She was demonstrating the coffee station when the door chimed. Lakeisha looked up and froze. Hana stood in the entrance, elegant as ever in Burberry and Louboutins, looking wildly out of place among the center's warm, welcoming chaos. "We need to talk," Hana said in English. "It's about Ju-won." Lakeisha's heart dropped. Is he hurt?" "He's alive, but he's not well." Hana's expression was complex, worry mixed with something like respect. "He's been taking risks since you left, reckless ones, like he doesn't care if he lives or dies." "That's not my responsibility," Lakeisha said, but the words felt hollow. "I know, and I hated you for months, thinking you'd ruined him with your softness." Hana smiled without humor. "But then I realized you didn't ruin him. You showed him there's more to life than violence and power. And now he's stuck between two worlds, the one he knows and the one you made him want." "What do you want me to do about it?" Lakeisha asked, exhaustion creeping into her voice. "Go back? Give up everything I've built here?" "No. I want you to let him go, completely." Hana pulled out her phone, showed Lakeisha a photo. Ju-won at some meeting, looking older somehow. Harbor. "He still has your number saved, checks his phone obsessively. He's not moving forward because he's still holding on to you." Lakeisha's chest tightened. "What would you have me do?" "Block him. Delete everything. Make it impossible for him to reach you. It'll hurt. It'll destroy him for a while. But eventually, he'll heal. He'll move on. We both will." Hana's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I loved him for years, you know. Still do in my way. But I was never strong enough to save him from himself. You were. Now be strong enough to let him go." After Hana left, Lakeisha sat in her office, staring at her phone. Ju-won's contact was still there, unchanged. JJW, with a photo from the gala, both of them smiling, looking like the happy couple they'd pretended to be. She thought about Lagos, about the men who'd hurt her and the justice Ju-won had delivered, about broken glass and bandaged hands, about a kiss that tasted like goodbye. Then she thought about the women in the other room, building new lives far from violence, and about the life she was building too, clean, independent, hers. With shaking hands, she deleted the contact, blocked the number, erased the photos. It felt like carving out her own heart, but it also felt like freedom. The center was thriving, expanding into a second location. Lakeisha had been featured in Korean news as a successful foreign entrepreneur, had secured government grants, had helped dozens of women find jobs in community. She dated occasionally, nothing serious, nothing that stuck. Her heart still belonged to a memory of a dangerous man who'd seen her as magnificent. One evening, sorting through mail, she found an unmarked envelope. Inside, a newspaper clipping. Lee Ju-won announces retirement from Seoul Business Council. Sources say the former nightclub mogul is relocating to Jeju Island to pursue quieter ventures. No comment on the sale of his Seoul properties or the dissolution of his organization. Beneath the clipping, a note in his handwriting. "I took your advice. Building something clean, something mine. Thank you for showing me it's possible. I hope you're happy. You deserve to be. J. P.S. I'll always remember you as the woman who saved my life by refusing to stay in it." Lakeisha pressed the note to her chest, tears flowing freely now. Across Seoul, in the direction of Jeju Island, she sent a silent wish. Be safe, be whole, find peace. And then she returned to her work, to the women waiting for her help, to the life she'd built from ashes and strength. The love had been real, the parting had been necessary, and somehow both truths could exist at once, beautiful and heartbreaking, like everything worthwhile in this complicated world. She'd learned in Lagos that survival meant making impossible choices. In Seoul, she'd learned that sometimes the hardest choice was letting someone go precisely because you loved them. It was a lesson written in scars and sealed with a kiss she'd carry forever. The end. This story hit different, didn't it? That ending where they both chose growth over staying together? Tell me in the comments, are you team they should have stayed together, or team the separation was necessary? And have you ever had to walk away from someone you loved because staying would have destroyed you both? Drop your thoughts below. Your comments keep this channel alive, and I read every single one. If this story made you feel something, whether it broke your heart or made you respect Lakeisha's strength, smash that like button and subscribe to Love and Tension for more stories that don't give you easy answers. Because real love isn't always happily ever after. Sometimes it's just bittersweet and beautiful, and exactly what both people needed.